The universe is so vast and infinite that the possibilities that exist are limitless. This is also true of our minds, making them and the universe related in a profound way. Our minds have the capacity to consciously create mental constructs that go beyond the scope of what we may be currently experiencing in our physical state. And the universe has the ability to answer our requests by matching the mind's unbounded nature. It's important to understand that consciousness is a self-referential and self-reinforcing loop. Our minds read their own output as though it were input. In other words, we project out into our physical world what our mind most dominantly thinks and believes, and then we experience it as though it were from an outer source. In all actuality, the experience comes from within. Feedback loops exist in computing and in nature, including our brains and every system and cell in our bodies. Consciousness is an unending circle of thought, experience, reactionary thought, experience, more reactionary thoughts, more experience, and so on. And this is the feedback loop that will often keep people in familiar experiences without much deviation. As mentioned, it flawlessly reinforces itself. These loops can be summed up as who we are, what we identify with, and which experiences we create. The mind loops, and then our brain becomes the vessel that creates the lens through which we observe and interact with that loop. On a deeper level, one of the brain's functions is to bring our awareness and action to any situations that appear to be uncomfortable. Much like an alarm system, it will give us a signal to pay attention to. These signals happen when there is a mismatch, not when we are experiencing comfort or satisfaction. For example, you might be in a restaurant with many people, one of them being a child who is misbehaving. Your brain will lock on to the misbehaving child because this signals that something is out of balance. There may be many other children behaving quite nicely, but the brain won't notice them as easily because it deems their behavior as balanced. In other words, the brain doesn't consciously pay attention near as often when what we want matches what we are getting. Because there's no signal generated by the brain when everything is comfortable, we don't hold much awareness of the fact that there is actually comfort. And the alarm, or brain signal, is the reason it can become so easy to get stuck in negative feedback loops that the brain generates. Negative feedback loops are useful for survival. For example, your brain probably tells you that it's a bad idea to stick your hand in a fire because it will get burned. But negative feedback loops can also become ingrained for other things that aren't as useful, such as telling you that you shouldn't even try something because you might end up failing, or being criticized by others. The first example is useful and grounded in fact, whereas the second loop has little to no factual basis and can be destructive to the type of life a person truly wants to live. And sometimes our subconscious brain can have difficulty telling the difference between the two. We should never just allow our negative thoughts to be accepted as 100% accurate. It's important to challenge their validity. If a person you didn't know walked up to you and told you they wanted to give you a handful of magic beans, you would most likely be skeptical of them. And this is the way we might consider viewing our negative thoughts, with skepticism. Think of your negative thoughts as a random person who you don't know trying to sell you something that sounds too absurd to be true. If we continue to let automatic and negative thoughts persist unchallenged, it will only reinforce them and the loop they have established. But when we begin to notice that our automatic negative thoughts do not have authority over us, we can strip them of any power we may have once perceived that they had and begin to change the negative feedback loop into a positive one. Another way to get around these negative feedback loops is by going against the brain's biology. We do this by extending extra effort to find the moments and areas where our reality matches our desired outcome. Have you ever played the card game Concentration? All the cards are laid face down on a surface, and 2 cards are flipped face up during each turn. The object of the game is to turn over pairs of matching cards. Your mind matches the 2 like items through recalling where they are. This is the same concept used to reinforce positive feedback loops that create more positive outcomes. Looking for successful accomplishments, especially small and minor ones, is not part of our nature. So we must consciously go against the biology of our brain to notice all of the matches, the pleasant, abundant, happy moments in our life. This begins the process of teaching the brain to signal you when something good is happening, which in turn produces a positive feedback loop that begins to reinforce itself. Simply take moments out of your day to notice when everything feels comfortable and consciously match it with what is happening around you. For example, as you're driving to work, you might notice when all of the green lights are in your favor, or even that you're just comfortable that you have a car to drive. Consider this. Have you ever been sick and thought you'd do anything to feel better? And then when you do feel better for some time, you don't really think much about it at all? These are the types of comforts that you begin to match with your experience, so your brain notices and creates a new positive feedback loop. Remember that the reality we experience is a projection of our most dominant thoughts and beliefs. From an energetic and universal standpoint, there are also quantum feedback loops. Energy flows through each of us, into the outer world and back again. We are conduits for universal action, and we amplify any effects by bringing attention to the feedback loops that are occurring. From this perspective, we can shift our attention to a higher plane of consciousness. This requires developing the ability to maintain a split focus, partially maintaining connection on the plane of the intellect, and partially feeling the sense of comfort and alignment around us. This is essentially the same concept as actively looking for the pleasantries in life. However, this process incorporates the feeling states and energy required to strengthen the new positive feedback loops that are being created. Just take a few moments to sit quietly and feel your energetic field expand out past your body. Imagine it stretching out as far as you can feel it. This is a higher plane and dimension where there is complete alignment, and you can feel for a new quantum feedback loop of positive energy. Next, try to imagine this energy attaching itself to all of the comforts you have noticed with the new positive feedback loop that you're creating, and then visualize it flowing through your body, back out again as your experience, and then looping back again through you as a continual cycle. This visualization process will help solidify your new reality in both your mind and vibrational state. Consider the idea that many times, possibly even every time you make a decision or choice, you are literally changing the reality that you experience. If you want to experience a new reality, you must consciously challenge anything negative that comes into your mind or experience and train your brain to cooperate in a way that you tell it to. By forcing our brains to look for positives and comforts, no matter how basic, we begin to form a habit of finding the positive in any and all situations. And by doing this long enough, the brain will eventually do it on its own. Your subconscious mind will go from alerting you to all of the negatives and treating them as reality, to signaling you to all of the positives, including any solutions to current challenges, and making that the new reality. Once this takes place, you have effectively reversed the negative feedback loop into a positive one. Any output or reality we experience has the potential to affect any future output we experience based on how we react or consciously perceive. If we change our perception of what is being broadcast as our reality, we can create new thoughts about that reality or new input, which when persisted in can become the dominant loop that creates a new projection or a new reality of our choosing.